Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today. Today we are back again with our monthly meet and we have a special guest with us, developer Steve, who comes with a very strong background as a developer advocate with over 20 years experience, and he has worked with many companies, startups and not-for-profit of all sizes. He has worked closely with developer communities as a tech evangelist and an advocate. And today he'll be sharing something very interesting, how exactly things can be tricky and what are the stranger dangers. So let me just get him on board. Hi,
I'm
Steve.
live. Hi, how you doing?
I am good. Thank you for joining me today.
Oh, thank you for having me. Really looking forward to geeking out. I always love geeking out. So what am I saying? Yeah, I know. Amazing to be here.
Great. So I'm going to go off screen and the stage is all yours.
Amazing. Oh, and my prezzo's on there. I can see it now. Hello, everyone, and thank you all for joining me. Thank you all for joining this session. Really excited to be here. If you're watching along on the live chat, I am keeping an eye. I just switched tabs, so I am keeping an eye on the chat. If you have any questions, comments, emojis, if you're going to cringe at my bad dev jokes, warning they are coming, but we will get to that. Then please put them into the live chat. Like I said, it's really amazing to be here. This is kind of following on from a YouTube or one of the videos on the YouTube, on the Bangalore YouTube, meetup YouTube that I saw recently with Liren Tao, my manager. Amazing. Hi, Liren, if you're watching. Yeah, just sort of following on from his session around developer advocacy. So I am one of the senior developer advocates at Sneak, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what I do in the community today. But we'll get to that. There's time for that. Let me switch to my slide deck. There we go. Look at that animation. Oh, I love that animation. Anyway, let's get underway. So I do have a disclaimer. Now, I do like developer jokes, dev jokes, well, technology jokes, really. And I do have a whole bunch of them. So this is my disclaimer, is there's going to be a few in there. And I always love starting off with one because, well, it's important that we keep smiling in such times as we are. On that note, I hope everyone is safe and well and just doing some fun things as much as you can. Anyway, onto the dev joke. Enough delay. So, why did the vulnerability get tired? You might be like, oh, why would the vulnerability get tired? Well, it's because it ransomware. Aha. Now, these are open source, like much of my code demos and all the techie, geeky, fun things I'm doing. So please share it with your teams because, again, we need to keep smiling in these days. So for those that I haven't met yet, my name is Developer Steve. Actually, legally, bit of a story behind that. And I always love doing on this slide because, well, it's important that we connect in such times. Incidentally, after the session, if you want to reach out and connect on, well, pretty much every social media platform, no surprises, I am Developer Steve on there as well. But the story behind my name is I actually got married a few years ago. So that's in the top right-hand corner. That's my wedding picture. Actually, the top of that cake, I 3D printed the night before my wedding. Because as an advocate, I like to live dangerously sometimes with demos the day before. No, we don't condone that. Anyway, when we got married, we decided to combine our last names. So Cooper plus Houchin became Kuchin. So that is my married name. And while my name was in the shop, so to speak, getting, I'm going to say, some upgrades, I decided to make Developer Steve my middle name because I've been an advocate for a number of years now for some amazing companies. So previously PayPal, Braintree, Xero, which is an accounting company, Telstra, which is an Australian telecommunications company, IBM, and, well, now I do it for Sneak. And as an advocate, it's really cool because as a dev, and I've been coding for many years, going to get into that in a little bit, I just get to go out and help communities do the amazing work they do, like this community, which is great. So I do like connecting with folks. If you want to connect after this or during this, then yeah, hit me up because, yeah, I'd love to connect. Anyway, enough about that. Let's get underway. So, as you probably just alluded to, I am a developer. I have been for many years. And I thought from the OWASP security point of view, in that push for shift security left, this is kind of an ask me anything sort of session, if anything, because if there's any sort of questions you've always wanted to ask developers or you wanted to know about developers, particularly from the security adoption side of things, and that's pretty much the way this session is geared around. Like as a dev, security is something I may not have necessarily have given first thoughts to in the past. And I'm going to look at why and sort of how that's now changing from a developer's point of view as well. On that note, I'm just going to say, and like I've been a CTO as well, and like security definitely from a C-suite or a CTO point of view was something I was very mindful of. In particular, I was a CTO for a payments company doing real-time payments in using the payment networks in Australia. And obviously, yeah, security and payments were massive even a few years ago. Well, it's always been pretty big because that's money. But I just wanted to say for those that are joining from the security, as a security professional from the OWASP view side of things, I just want to say as a dev, I totally get it now. I totally do. I mean, I understood it back in through my coding history, if you will, my coding origin story. But more so in the last few years, I'm starting to see that adoption shift where developers are starting to keep that mindset at the code front. And that's something that I do with the session that we're going to be looking through today is I'm talking through how now as a developer advocate for particularly from a security company's point of view is how I'm helping them adopt and understand why that's important and just how that can be seamlessly integrated into workflows and well, just embracing the security side of things more at the offset, at the code front. So like I said, I've been coding for many, many years now. And for those that remember it, and I'm totally going to give away my age here because I was coding at the age of 8 using an Atari 800 XL, for those that remember it, using QBasic. Well, it was basic. As the name suggests, it was pretty basic. But they weren't things like libraries, dependencies, and the open source world was still in its infancy. So sharing, like having all the amazing open source communities build out and share knowledge, share code, like literally building off the backs of the previous generations of developers. It's just something that didn't happen at the time. And going through my coding origin story, I love that. I love saying that. Going through my coding origin story when I was working in digital agency and even freelancing, it was great to be able to leverage, open source libraries, open source platforms to build out applications just so much quicker and so much easier than back in the QBasic days when you would literally be writing everything over and over again or reusing code elements from past projects. Like you didn't have that rich open source ecosystem to be able to leverage and speed up app development and experience development, which is something I love now as a developer. Like I can take literally a few lines of code, import a particular library, and build an application. And from a developer point of view, something I always love to highlight is like we build these applications as developers to, help people in their everyday lives, be it a entertainment app, a delivery app, or a food ordering app, even right through to the enterprise side of things where we're building applications that help speed up workflow. So being able to update back into a CRM or just update their everyday lives, like being able to seamlessly facilitate that whole experience of, making their lives easier, essentially. But something I had recognized sort of even going through my coding history was like, what else is hiding inside this library, or what is this library doing when I deploy onto a stack? In digital agency days, especially when I was building out single campaign sites for clients and building out client applications, this was something I was not only I had in the back of my mind, but obviously due to deadlines, due to pressures, like this wasn't something that I would generally give a whole lot of thought to until, and I still wake up in cold sweats during the night over this one, until you discover that thing that you've deployed, that application, that website, etc., suddenly has a whole bunch of spam in it, and there's all sorts of nasty things going on the server side, which of course then leads to clean up projects and redeploying code and finding the vulnerability, etc., which like so many times. So back to that GIF where I'm like, I totally get it now. And it's no surprises that on the open source side of things, like we're seeing an exponential growth in the number of packages, the number of libraries now being created into ecosystems. Quite often, what we're seeing now, particularly with some of the functionality that gets loaded into all these different library types, quite often you see groups of functionality split out into separate libraries, which then in turn gets used as a dependency in other ecosystems, other libraries. Like we're seeing such an exponential growth now in the number of packages being created, which of course, as we know, as security professionals, you all know as well, the number of vulnerabilities being surfaced starts to grow with that as well. And in particular, if you think the infrastructure that all this open source is also adopting, so into containerized environments, etc., like we're seeing so many vulnerabilities surface. And of course, as many of you from the security world will know, like a lot of the times, this is a combination of particular library type and a particular operating system or server environment is creating a lot of these vulnerabilities or surfacing these vulnerabilities in the application. If you think about it, a holistic stack view, it is like an iceberg that you can see on the left. So developer code at the very top or the very tip of the iceberg is the publicly available code, which obviously with surfaced vulnerabilities becomes an attack vector for, well, malicious actors to be able to get into that stack. The amount of times as well, particularly in agency days, where one little vulnerability suddenly lets a script in, lets someone do that whole vector attack approach, which then also costs business or costs infrastructure uh, so much money. I can't tell you the amount of times that I got handed a bill, particularly in agency days, of like, why is this bill suddenly dropped like so much percent from the last month? And you dig through logs, you dig through infrastructure, and you find that one little bug or one little hole in the code that has let something in, and there's a root script running on your server so many times. And so as devs, though, one of the things I really love, and it goes back to the whole developer first approach, is these libraries though do surface some rich functionality. So I can literally go npm install, composer install, pull in the particular library that I need, and be able to build out an application really, really quickly. And that part I love. Like as a dev, it's the best thing. Special mention here too, and I don't know how many times this has happened where you're up at 1 a.m. trying to solve that particular problem. You find the answer on Stack Overflow. Well, you think you find the answer. But in the back of my mind, even when I was doing that, like I was always thinking, like, what else is this doing? Like this npm install, this particular library type being pulled into my application, what's that actually doing to the actual code itself? Just going to pause there because I'm going to switch to YouTube. If you're questions, maybe I'll just have a. Anyway, of course, something that's getting more and more spotlight in recent days is the whole concept around open source supply chain security. And I won't go into that too much now, but from a developer point of view, that is starting to become more prevalent in, well, developers' day-to-day life. Like they're starting to become more aware of particular open source supply chain, well, things in the media, just articles they're seeing, but also being more aware at the code front, at the offset of what being led into their stack. Of course, there's so many different examples of this in play. Electron Native Notify is just one where a dependency gets pulled in to a particular library type. I pull in a particular library type that needs to, well, if you're extra special mention, because we're already special mention. Extra special mention too that a lot of the big companies that generally hire a lot of developers also back a lot of these projects as well. So it's from a student point of view, always a good way to get involved with open source, because well, you can get seen more, you can get involved, you can get hands on, and you can show companies people like what you can do as coding goes. Anyway, but enough of that. One of the ways we get involved with open source communities, I mean, other than advocates going out and working closely with them, is we have a platform called Sneak Advisor that can advise on be aware of. It allows them to do due diligence on the packages that they're using. It's actually really handy. I've looked up so many things on there that I've used in the past, and we're going to have a look at a couple today when we get to the demo stage. But it's really handy because from a development point of view, you can do due diligence and be able to see the history behind the different package, behind the library, how fast things were patched, like if there's any outstanding issues. It gives you a holistic view on some of the stuff you're using, which is really, really handy. Also, the direct responsibility for the Node.js ecosystem vulnerability disclosure program, which is really cool because again, it helps us be able to give back to that ecosystem and be able to, well, help keep people safe. Remember, from a development point of view, like it's our jobs as devs is to build out those applications and not only to help seamlessly create sort of new experiences for our end users, but this is something I highlight with devs too, which is we got to keep them safe. Like building out that application is just the first step. Keeping our users and their data safe, totally important as well. So up to 80% of, and I'm sure these are numbers that most of you amazing security folk are going to know, but up to 80% of vulnerabilities we find through indirect dependencies. And we're going to have a look at a couple today. Actually, I have a few demos of this where, like, as a dev, I pull in a particular library type, and the vulnerability doesn't come in through that direct dependency. It comes in through the indirect one. So that one library could pull in 4 other open source projects, and that's where we see the vulnerability surface. That Electron native notify example from earlier, if you're not familiar with it, there's some great write-ups on it, but that is one of the ways that we see like a direct indirect dependency open up vulnerabilities into a particular stack. Which is why, like, this is something I love highlighting with developers in particular, is why it's important to make sure you do the due diligence on what you're using at the offset, like at the code front, to make sure you don't open up doors into a stack and let in nasty things. Because the last thing any developer wants is to compromise that application they're building for end users and open up a door into a stack, which ultimately means it, well, compromises users' data, but also they're going to get that big bill at the end where someone goes, what's this? No one wants that, including the business. Which is why, like, continually scanning code and particular package manifest, but also at the code level too, is so important. Like being able to identify those threats up front is critical. And I have some code for this today, so we're going to look through as well. And it's not even just the initial scanning of the code, like while it's being written, but it's also the ongoing scanning as well. Because as we know from the security world, like we see vulnerabilities surface consistently as new methods are adopted, new methodologies, new approaches, new attack vectors. Like it's that continual scanning that is able to identify them. Of course, the code front is literally just the start of that whole application journey, or just part of that iceberg. And quite often we see, like in the cloud native world, like there's a whole other two tiers in that iceberg that now we also need to be more mindful of as well. Containerization, for example, we see 242 billion downloads of just from Docker alone. So if you think like in the approach to containerization or modernization, or stack modernization as it's known, that whole adoption into the containerized world is, well, that's something we need to be mindful of too, particularly when you think like Docker images are basically built from using the open source libraries that we've literally just been talking about, like Node.js, for example. Knowing what's inside that container before you actually put it into your stack, move it in, put an application on it, then move it into production, is something you need to be scanning for as well, to make sure that the container you're using has no nasty things hiding in there. And this is something I highlight quite strongly with developers a lot, because like keeping that code clean is literally just the first step. Keeping that environment clean, totally just as important, because you don't want to have nice clean code that you then put onto a container that has hidden nasties hiding in it. And that's something we see a lot of as well, like the top 10 Docker base images on Docker Hub year on year, consistently carrying security vulnerabilities inside them. Again, a lot of these containers are built using those open source projects, libraries that we've just been looking at. So it's equally as important to make sure as well. Special mention here too, and I created this beaver to go too. This is kind of a dev joke, but as I always like to think about it, with great containerization does come great responsibility. From the container point of view, like the fact that they're able to bring, and the modernization point of view, like one of the things I love, well, not only is it, but just in general, is that it does bring scalability with it. Like you're able to deploy an application that affects so many users, but as you bring users on, you need that scalability. Again, it's about keeping your users safe as much as it is that whole scalability piece though too. So totally need to be continually scanning those as well, to make sure you're picking up any hidden nasties that might be hiding, in particular inside that stack. Being able to identify just once off that Docker file or that container is clean is just the start of that whole journey. So need to be continually scanning them to make sure you're finding any new and surface vulnerabilities and getting them before they go into production, or being alerted once, if it is in production, being alerted before before it gets used as an attack vector. Not going to delve too much into this one, but the last part of the iceberg becomes infrastructure as code. And this is something I'm actually going to be doing a demo of today. I hope it works. Last time I did have a couple of little quirks appear, but this is fine. This is fine. I like it dangerously. Anyway, infrastructure as code from a developer point of view is great, because like this is the way that I can use a manifest file, a config file, sorry, to be able to define the operating environment that my application needs to be run in. From an operation side of things, you're able to guide the different environment types that a developer can use in deploying their application. So it becomes a really nice synergy of being able to deploy an app really, really fast. Plus, from an ops point of view, you can put some nice gates in place to allow things like testing, or not only for the code itself to make sure it's going to run really well or in an optimized way, but also security gates too, to make sure that application, the code's clean and there's nothing nasty hiding in the package manifest files. Anyway, let's have a look at some code. So actually, before we do that, I'll switch over to the YouTube. Is there a glitch in the stream, or is my internet bad? Actually, I hope it's, I don't think it's my internet, but if it is, let me know. I'll keep an eye on the chat. Anyway, let's have a look at a couple of demos. So again, this is something that I use to highlight with devs, like why it's important to be scanning and what they're looking for, essentially. I have done some, as a developer, I have done some pen testing in the past. sometimes scheduled, sometimes unscheduled. Again, I like to live dangerously. But in particular, one that's always plagued me is XSS attacks, because sanitization on input, like as a dev, it's just so critically important. Anyway, I know I know many of you will be familiar with the techniques that I'm about to do or to demonstrate. But from a developer point of view, I wanted to demonstrate, this is like a meta demo. I wanted to demonstrate the demos that I normally do so you understand how I'm helping educate the developers to embrace that whole shift left mentality. Anyway, down with the demo. This is one we use a lot. One of my favorite things I love with this is that there's 57 vulnerabilities that I know about, but I still run it on my computer. I still run it in my infrastructure. Totally love to live dangerously. But yeah, this is one of our demo applications that we use to highlight how these things surface and then why they need to be scanned for. So this demo is a to-do app, so very simple, running in Node.js. In the exploits folder inside this repo, there's a whole bunch of different vulnerabilities you can try. I always advise devs to make sure they do not run this in production, totally for demo purposes only. Feel free to try this at home. The library we're looking at in particular today, this vulnerability is using the marked package. We're using from the package manifest file, we're using marked 0.3.5. Let me make that a bit bigger. There we go. We're using marked 0.3.5, and anything below 0.3.6, well, you shouldn't use it. So let's see what it does. This one, I kind of already know what to expect. It's literally a markdown library. So what it does is, as a user, I can do something like that. So the asterisk is in markdown, literally just will make that particular part of the input bold, as you can see there. On the application side, as you can see here, I've got, again, this is in Node.js. In the library config, I've got a sanitize is true flag on. That's generally how this particular library gets used. And what that sanitization does at the code level, at the dev level, is tries to do some basic regex to identify and sanitize user-based inputs. So it's using some regex. I've already dug into the library, so it's basically using some regex, and then it tries to do some syntax matching as well, basically to identify bad inputs. So this is Markdown though. So one of the things I can do with Markdown is do some links like that, which is not like that's an expected result. I'm getting a link appear when I hover over it. I can see that it's going to the place that I was intending to. Something, of course, as from a OWASP attack method, something we're able to do with this, and this is in the OWASP top 10 as well, is be able to HTML encode characters as part of the input to try and get around that whole regex sanitization identification from the user input. So one thing I can do with JavaScript is not only URL encode the input, or as part of the input, not only URL encode, but use the JavaScript executable method like this to be able to inject some JavaScript in that then appears on the user's browser side, which of course is one of the OWASP methods. So as you can see, that one didn't get stopped. And if I click that, it comes up with this alert box is alerting. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I've actually done in one of the in my Dev Origin story, I've done something similar before using a JavaScript redirect with a parent URL. So yeah, I had actually raised with the development team when I noticed they weren't sanitizing their input. And I always strongly encourage developers to be sanitizing input. Totally need to be sanitizing input. But yeah, I was able to do something very similar to inject a parent frame, the HTTP redirect, and redirect like the entire application for everyone using it to a completely different website. Subsequently, after doing that, and total grey hat hacker, I told them, and then I told them before that, and it didn't get fixed. So I did it, and then it got fixed. So always be grey hat, always be grey hat. I've run through another demo that I normally do. So this is using Java. Again, this doesn't have the little badge on it though. I need to get that added. Very similar. It's another to-do app. This one's running on Heroku and we're going to be looking at a zip package that we exploit. A zip package that we upload to exploit a zip package and also Java. Again, not for production use, just for literally for trying this at home. But there's a whole bunch of different vulnerabilities you can try as part of this, including the zip slip zip. That's a tongue twister that we're going to be looking at now. Essentially, what it does is a file traversal and then replaces a function inside Java. I ended up on the wrong side. There's a really good write-up on this. I think. Nope. Hey, there we go. There's a really good write-up on this. This is something we've seen surface quite a bit over the years, and I'm sure you're all familiar with the particular exploit. But let's look at the particular library. See, this is running on Heroku, and I should have updated that first because for those that are familiar with Heroku, it takes a second to warm up sometimes. That's all right. Well, it's doing that. What we're going to do is look at the code. So this is exploiting one thing, essentially the zip util, and then also that's going to replace there it is, native to ASCII function inside Java. The file in question that we're going to have a look at is this zip slip zip. Yeah, you really have to slow down to say that. And that's basically just doing a classic file traversal inside the zip. So that basically gets decompressed on the server side using that particular library, and then overwrites that particular native Java functionality. So let's get logged into our app. Oh, don't you hate that? I think I may have actually used the wrong password. Hang on. Let's try that again. Oh, it worked that time. Hey, yeah, I know prone. Yep, I know that's vulnerable. So let me just resize a couple of things here. Here we go. So very similar to the last one. This is a basic to-do application. I can create a basic testing. The date's a little off, but that's because I haven't set an environmental variable inside here. That's fine. It'll still demonstrate a thing. But yeah, literally, I can create, as a user, I can create to-do list items on there pretty easily. One thing I can also do is upload a file. So let's upload our exploited zip file into there as well. And of course, I'm not in the right folder, but this is fine. See, I've been testing a lot of different platforms and such. It's been super interesting to find this stuff. Exploits, that's what I wanted. And we want the zip slip zip. There we go there. So inside my uploaded public folder, I've got a good.txt file sitting in there. As a user, if I go back now and try and create another testing again, another to-do item list in there, we can go medium. And as you can see there, I've now, well, the zip was able to exploit that Java function, and now I've got a problem. And you can imagine like what else you can use that for. Well, as security people, you already know what the malicious things is. From a developer point of view, these things are like really eye-opening because it's something you wouldn't traditionally normally have dealt with from the code front point of view. So it's not something you were looking to detect until that security person. And I'm sure you've all been there, going into the development area, going, hey. There's a problem with this particular app because this. It's let something in and now I've got to fix it. Which is why these demos are so important, because like this is helping devs understand why they need to be adopting that mindset. I've got two more that I want to walk through. So this is literally an off-the-shelf platform, open source platform called Ghost. So this is I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with WordPress. This is a NPM or Node.js variation of WordPress. It's blogging software that is quite commonly used. In particular, a few years ago, when everyone was moving from WordPress for security reasons, there was a lot of adoption with Ghost. I've actually done a few talks recently with some JavaScript groups, and like I literally live demo what I'm about to do and say, hey, make sure you're scanning it because, well, let's have a look. So as I said, I literally have the latest version of Ghost sitting in this folder. If I use sneak at the command line just to run a test or a scan, it's going to check the, it's actually clean now. All right, cool. I've got another one anyway. Huh. I wonder when that updated. Anyway, well, I'm glad that that's now clean. Originally, that actually came up. See, live demos, you never know what's going to happen. Originally, oh, I can't see my terminal. Hey, there we go. Originally, that came up with a whole bunch of errors and alerts, but now it's clean. Cool. Probably should have checked that one before we came on here. Anyway, I have some others. Let's go to another one. Actually, let's change track and go PHP. I know I've got a few in here. So I don't know if anyone's familiar with it. Actually, I know PrestaShop. So I've run so many, and the thing that surprised me the most with a lot of the stuff that I've been scanning in the past few months, or platforms that I've used before, is like I've run a lot of e-commerce platforms before. So both freelance, just companies that I'd started, or sites that I'd started in the past, but also for clients as well, and like fully deployed platforms like Magento, or one of the other more common ones is a platform called PrestaShop, which is it's pretty good. Like I've used it, like I said, to run e-commerce sites before. This is similar to WooCommerce on WordPress, that WooCommerce plugin. The thing that surprised me the most, which I know this one's got a 5 of it. Oops, I spelled it right. But yeah, this is something I was pretty shocked about. Yeah, there we go. Ooh, found one. That was pretty shocked that that this had as many in it as it did, because like I ultimately, this is people paying, like buying things from you and paying money. So you're storing their address information, you're storing their potentially their payment information, unless you're using like Braintree or Stripe or some type of tokenized payment, which I totally recommend. But yeah, there's some vulnerability surfaced inside here, which which isn't cool. Still totally recommend that devs scan a lot of these projects. Even actually, one I did find, I think I may have updated it because is Drupal, which is used a lot in government websites. Actually, let's see if it's still doing it. I did update this the other day. Yeah, okay, it's now clean. So Drupal 7 up until recently, and I wrote a blog post on this as well, had a number of vulnerabilities in there, like off the shelf. Of course, a lot of people are upgrading their sites, and I totally recommend doing it to Drupal 8 and Drupal 9 now. But yeah, this was one as well that had some nasties hiding in there. Anyway, enough of that. I'm going to switch to the last one now. This is one more demo. This demo I've been doing recently just to show how easily you can build security gates into a CI/CD workflow to make sure that before code gets deployed, it does go through those checks and balances to make sure it's all clean. So this is just running from my GitHub. So as you can see there, this is just an AWS code pipeline sample demo. And it's actually using the Node.js code from the AWS Elastic Beanstalk. I like Elastic Beanstalk. Elastic Beanstalk documentation. So it's literally just the demo code straight from there. One of the things I love about this, and I was saying before, like as a developer, being able to configure the server infrastructure that I need for my application to run in. Or as a dev, I've always loved this, particularly adopting that whole DevOps approach, is I get to build my own playgrounds. That's always great. Like, I love that. Anyway, let me just refresh this to make sure I'm still signed in, that it didn't time me out. Hey, there we go. And it's really easy to do, like to build into your pipeline. So just going to call this one test pipe. There we go. I'm going to choose some of this I've already configured earlier just to speed things up a little bit. Source provider is going to be GitHub version 2 because they're depreciating version 1. And I'm already got my GitHub connection hooked up. It should load my many repositories. There we go. So I'm just going to choose that one we were just looking at, branch name, which is main. And I'm going to use code pipeline default as my output artifact format. And in the build stage, I'm just going to choose AWS code build and let it go to the region that it wants. Project name I've already defined, so just choose that one. Deploy provider, we're going to go Elastic Beanstalk. As the name suggests, it's very elastic. Application name is test app. Environment name we've already defined, so that's part of the Elastic Beanstalk config setup when I initially set it up. So this will create and deploy a holistic pipeline. A lot of different cloud platforms have this available. So Azure pipelines, etc. Like it's a really easy way to build a nice seamless CI/CD to get stuff deployed quickly. But the best part is, as part of this, I'm going to stop that execution, stop and wait. It should. Okay. Just going to stop that for a second. Otherwise, we end up with 2 running when I do this next thing. So what I'm going to do now is edit that and add a stage in just after the source gets pulled in as part of this pipeline. So we're going to add stage, going to call it security gate 1, because that sounds cool. I'm going to add a particular action to that. So scanning, and then provider, I'm going to grab the Sneak integration. There we go, grab the source artifact, connect to Sneak, which I've already done, and it should open any second now. Sometimes this, I still don't know why it does. Oh yeah, because that's right, which should then authorize any second now. Do I click it? Do I not click it? All right, let's click it. Like to live dangerously. Oh, let's try that again. Usually works the second time. Live demos. What can go wrong? Everything catches fire. I should switch to my this is fine scene, but I don't want to jinx it. Hey, there we go. See, now it works. Anyway, it worked in my environment. So as part of the config screen, when I'm hooking up to do the security scanning, I can select all the different vulnerability severances that will get blocked as part of the deployment. Just going to leave that on. Actually, let's make it go high. And then you can choose the different types of block deployments as well as part of that too. And like this can be brought in line with your security approach on your stack. But let's hit continue. That's now frozen. So that should be reporting back to the, disregard that 502. This is fine. It's a feature, not a bug, as devs usually say. Confirm, yes. Yay, that now worked. Don't need the variable namespace, but I'm going to put sec report. No, I'll just call it report. Report would help if I typed it right and click done. So now if I save that, yes, save, and then release, it'll grab the code again, run it through a security check. Yeah, there we go. Release change. Let's go. So it's going to grab that. It's grabbing the source now, then send it over to be scanned, which should kick in any second now. That first part usually doesn't take too long. So again, that's just pulling in from here. So there we go. Now that's now scanning. While that's scanning, I'm going to jump over and have a look at the projects on here, because this actually showed up something I was not expecting initially. I mean, I should have been, but then this talks to testament as to why we do these demos, because at the code level, it actually finds something wrong in that code sample, in the sample that we're using from the AWS documentation. So the AWS example that we're looking at for Elastic Beanstalk doesn't use HTTPS by default, which this scan actually flags as a problem with the code, a medium problem, because we should always use HTTPS. Special call out too for Let's Encrypt. As a dev, I love Let's Encrypt because, well, I don't have to buy certificates, and it's just really easy to set up pretty much everywhere these days. Anyway, so these demos are basically how we show developers like why they need to be doing this stuff and be mindful at the code front, at the offset, like why they're doing all while they're actually building the code, that they need to be more mindful of security and how we're helping them adopt it. Anyway, that was we can see, yeah, it's going to take a second. This bit, see, back in my day, no, I'm not going to go there. But there was a time, where setting up and deploying infrastructure used to take so much time, and now it's like literally minutes. But typical user, I want it in seconds. Like I want it now. This is one of those examples where I'm like, oh, but I want it now. Like, why isn't it there yet? Anyway, you get the idea with that one. And like this is just running in AWS free tiers, so feel free to grab the code, test it yourself, and play around with it. All the demos you saw here today are basically just directly available on the Sneak GitHub or on my GitHub. So that last one was just on mine. Again, just developer Steve. You can find me everywhere. Let's switch back to the Prezo. Actually, let me just check the YouTube, see if there's any. The stream is a bit laggy. Okay, cool. All right, let's switch through.
Yeah, we don't have any questions at the moment. The only thing is that the stream is a bit lagging.
Okay, is that my internet or no?
Yeah, I think it's your internet. Earlier, I was
I've
thinking
only got
it's
a few
my
more
internet.
slides. Oh, really? Let me close the YouTube. Maybe that's doing something. Hopefully that's a bit better. All right, I only have a few more slides, and then we'll see if there's any questions. Let me switch back to my slides. Okay, cool. Anyway, hope you enjoyed those demos. Hopefully you can still see the live stream. Check out the Sneak blog if you wanted to have a look at some of this stuff and a whole bunch more. In particular, wanted to call out another thing that surprised me, particularly from the development approach, is VS Code. My VS Code has vulnerabilities in it now because there's exploits been discovered inside some extensions. So this is particularly from a developer-centric point of view. Like this is something which is starting to make them realize, like not only at the code front and the infrastructure side of things, but also ensuring developer tools are clean and there's no issues in there. So anyway, read more about that one. Check out that link. Also, we're doing some live demos and some talks around that in the coming months. So yeah, check that one out. There's actually a really good live stream on why this is important on the Sneak YouTube. So Liren Tao actually did a live demo with Kirill, who one of the people from that article, demonstrating how this works and pretty much exposed Liren's password file from his development environment, well, from his Mac through his development environment, which is why this is so scary. This is so much scary that in setting up demos recently, I installed VM and got OS X running inside of VM because I didn't want to expose my password file while doing demos. Anyway, check that out. It's totally worth having a look at. That's about it for me. Just going to wrap up with some takeaways that I usually leave developers with, which is just to make sure they connect their source code repositories and scan them not once, but ongoingly as well. Any container images, just consistently scanning those and using base images and building what you need inside containers to make sure that environment's kept nice and clean as well. And infrastructure as a whole, like making sure you've got those security checks and balances in place to be consistently scanning infrastructure and making sure there's no bugs. Just wanted to do a quick mention. SneakCon 2021 is coming up in October. It is region friendly, so please register if you want to see some great talks. There's already some great CFPs. The CFP just closed, so I can't say like enter your CFP, but there's still some great talks in there from all sorts of people, from security through to coding, through best practice. There's some great stuff in there. last call out is for the DevSecOps Leadership Awards. So if you've got people or a community or a group of people doing some amazing work in the DevSecOps space, nominations are now open. So please check that out. It's free to enter. You just fill out a basic form, and yeah, you can get some great communities and folks doing work in the DevSecOps space. They can be nominated, like you can nominate them. Just lastly, and now I say use your developer superpowers for good normally when I'm talking to devs, and we're all devs these days, but also use your security developer superpowers for good. I need to change the wording on this one. Anyway, and of course, be excellent to each other. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Steve, for sharing the information. And it was very wonderful.
Thank you. Had fun doing it. Hopefully my internet was okay, or the stream was okay. It's normally all right, but
Yeah.
like live demos, what can go wrong?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. So I don't see any questions. I'm sure people would reach out to you. And as you mentioned at the beginning, your all handles are with Developer Steve as you go by, and they will reach out to you on that particular handle.
Amazing.
So
Thank
everyone,
you. Yeah. Looking for, if anyone does want to reach out, as been done and said, like just, yeah, reach out, say hi, even just reach out for another developer joke.
sure. Yeah, he makes a lot of joke. So thank you, Steve, for joining me today. It was wonderful speaking with you, and you shared really amazing content.
Thank you.